Before starting the debate with the panel, and also we hope that we can give the floor to you, because there will be some questions, reactions on what has been said, what you have learned, what you have, or the ideas you may have complementary to what have been said. I want first to thank and to congratulate the 8 persons who have been presenting this, because I know the cases, because I have been assisting the jury for the most endangered now for the 3rd time. So, for the 4th time, I know what is in the text. This whole book, whole books of documents and so on. I must say this is done in a very concise, but a very complete way. Even I got the impression some of them were becoming experts, talking about some details, even as if they had been there themselves, and even some, and that I think is very important, they made also the reflection to their own country, to a piece of heritage in their country. And that's really one of the purposes of what we are doing today here with the Institute. So we take the European example, but this is not at all for sure limited to Europe. It's all over the world, but of course, Europa Nostra, we are working within Europe for the time being. Maybe we go further, because then I stop, in the winners of this year. So first of all, Europa Nostra is not just the European Union. You have seen Georgia and so the countries, so the former Eastern Europe countries, for us that's all Europe. But one of the winners this year is in Egypt, in the Sinai. It's very strange. For the first time, so in the Sinai there is monasteries there, and it's because Italian and Greek organizations who are working there who have been presenting this. And so we said it's so wonderful project. It will get an award for excellence. So this is a really stepping completely outside Europe. Okay, this is what we agreed with the panel members. I've been talking to the 4 ladies, and the man, Dr. Connor, says, leave me just out. I'm going to see what I'm going to tell, because so for me it's good as is also a man, because otherwise I said to them, if there hadn't been a man, it would, as moderator, that's the dream you can have. Moderating a panel with 4 ladies, you have just to listen. That's all. no problem. So we agreed that each of them should give in some minutes what they have been thinking of that is crucial in this endangered heritage, and what should happen, where is a key concern, who and why could do something, so that just ideas they have got out of this. So I start with on my side here, very close to me, we have Mrs. Aida Vezic, and she is executive board member of NEMO, so the Balkans Museum Network, so particular NEMO, but then for the Balkans. She is the regional museum coordinator and deputy head of the Bosnia-Herzegovina at the foundation, and the Cultural Heritage Without Borders. I think this is really a nice term for what we have been speaking here, so in the frame of the international diplomacy without borders. So, Aida, what's your opinion about what you have heard?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really honored to be with you today, and so happy to meet the staff from the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy and everyone at the event. Yes, so many organizations that I present, but I think it's important to bring in museums to the story and to talk about their responsibility and potential role that they can have in the promotion of heritage as a shared value for the humanity. So I'm a Secretary General of the Balkan Museum Network, the platform that exists for the last 12 years. And we are really growing. Every month we get at least 5 applications for membership. So starting from 11 museums, we are now 70 museums and 100 individuals. So the network is bringing both institutions, but also museum and heritage professionals. And we are basically creating a safe space for the museum professionals to support each other, to cross borders, to learn, share experiences, training them in different subjects. So I've noted down like 5 concrete ideas that I think that museums can play in supporting endangered sites. And first of all is co-creation with communities. So museums have to be the leaders in increasing inclusion and access. As these spaces of dialogue, they are the ones that can bring different stakeholders, artists, media, education institutions, governmental agencies. So being a hub, a meeting place where actually different activities around sites can be created. Then it's about interpretation. How do we tell stories about often contested heritage, often bringing in different narratives. So museums should really master the tools of heritage interpretation in having these multiple perspectives, multiple narratives, and allowing space for individuals and institutions to really be united in diversity. Thirdly, I think it's starting conversation, because if it's a difficult question, we tend to avoid difficult questions. So one of the slogans of our network is actually Museums for Social Justice, and we are a member of a Social Justice Alliance of Museums, also member of the network of European museum organizations. So I think starting conversations about difficult questions is very important, and bringing in minority voices. Then intersectoral approach. I think that museums as a bridge can serve as interpreters between the cultural sector with educational sector, with scientific sector, and a community with health and well-being. So they can really bring in this interdisciplinary element to the debate. And then we should never forget the public role and public interest, because museums as public institutions have to protect the public interest and go beyond these particularities of fragmented and individual interests of different stakeholders. Our slogan is really smarter, stronger, better together, because I think that's the really nice message for any positive change we want to achieve, that together we are smarter, stronger, and better.
Okay, thank you, Aida. That's quite a lot. So a whole plan, a whole strategy plan in 5 points. I thought is a nice thing is we normally expect, talking about heritage and endangered, that we should say start conservation, but you turned it around, start conversation. I think that's a nice idea. So it's one of your 5 points. Okay, then we move to let's say I go to Irina. So we know I know Irina quite well for a long time. We have been working together within Europa Nostra. We are both vice president in Europa Nostra. She is Emeritus of the University of Belgrade and Novi Sad, and she is teaching graduate programs at the University of Arts in Belgrade and at the Academy of Arts. And let's say Irina is one of those professionals who never gives up and speaks up. Irina. Yeah.
You wanted, Piet, maybe to say that I'm not speaking on the diplomatic level. We are here in the Academy of Diplomacy, and maybe I will not be diplomatic enough.
It's therefore that I said you speak up. Yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you, Aida, also for speaking in the name of the museums. I was working for 30 years in the museums, and I'm very passionate still now. And I think that museums are very responsible for our culture and for our heritage, including the matter that I would touch today, and those are wars. Because museums have that responsibility to preserve things and to manage, as you said, and to naturally explain them. But there are such a greed to have good collections. There are several museums, the greatest one in the world, especially outside of Europe, do not obey some rules, and that's not to take objects which are victims of the wars. And I'm very sensitive to the wars, because I'm coming also from the Balkans, from former Yugoslavia, where we have suffered very much the wars in the 90s, and our institutions suffered very much. So I think that the responsibility of the museums regarding the objects of art are extremely also important because, as I said, many works of art, memorials, locations, archaeological sites are the victims of the wars. We speak about Palmyra, we speak of many other things, but we speak also about the large museums which are collecting and looted things that would be also a kind of our responsibility in this endangered site. But if I speak about the wars, I think that the message of this conference could be also that the wars are disastrous for people. There are millions, naturally, we know all of immigrants, of displaced people, of injured, not only dead people. And that is something that we must have in mind when we have also heritage in question. Because heritage can divide people, can unite people also. And I would like to speak about some examples where the shared heritage has helped for the better understanding and for the solution of several problems. One of them is what we have mentioned today is Subotica synagogue on the northern part of Serbia, where a great number of Hungarian and Jewish population lived. Now, very few Jews have remained after the disastrous Nazist pogroms there. And this huge, marvelous synagogue is now restored recently, thanks to the involvement of the Jewish community, but especially thanks to the local communities, to the Hungarian communities, and all involved specialists from both Serbian, it means Republican level, provincial level, and municipality levels. So it means that this kind of collaboration helps for the survival and for the renewal of the greatness of such a monument. That was also involved European funds and very much Hungarian institutes and institutions which wanted that this trans-country, trans-state collaboration realized. And that was the monument which was on the list of the most endangered, 7 most endangered, which Europa Nostra has put. So I think that this is a very good example and successful example, which we love very much. Another example, which is very helpful also to mention, is a marvelous several thousand objects called stečak. Those are gravestones which exist on the Balkans from the 11th to the 14th, 15th century. And they are, 2 years ago, inscribed on the UNESCO list. How would you inscribe gravestones which are for such a large period covering, and also covering 4 countries, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, and Serbia? The condition of UNESCO was to make the common list. And that was also a marvelous way to collaborate among specialists, among the non-governmental organizations, and to see how this area is shared now. It used to be Yugoslavia once upon a time. Now those are 4 countries sharing the same heritage. And this is a very good example, again, where specialists combined and which now, after the wars, had a good success story. A more difficult question, which I am obliged to raise because I'm coming again from a territory where wars were so severe, that is the question of Kosovo. I think that everybody knows that we have negotiations very often in Brussels, supported also by United States, about the future of the southern province of Serbia, which is populated now primarily by Albanians. And that is a heritage which is mostly Ottoman on one side, but also extremely important from the medieval ages when Serbia had its capital there at the beginning of the great Serbia of the Byzantine time was in Kosovo. So this is thing which specialists are absolutely common in their statement. This heritage is on the list of UNESCO, and it is a heritage which is the heritage of the humanity. That's not only the Serbian heritage. But what and how it will be governed, that's a question that nobody puts now. Neither Albanians nor the Serbians. That's not the matter of the negotiations in Brussels. Nobody thinks that this is an extremely important, sensitive, and dangerous question, having in mind that during the wars in the 90s, some 129 medieval monuments were destroyed for the new identity, for the new state, for the new objectives. So this is something which we are very sensitive, and I think that Europa Nostra has already shown it's willing to combine the diplomacy and the goodwill in protection, heritage protection. When we met our colleagues from Albania, Albanians from Kosovo, in Canisi, in France, and after that we went to UNESCO to speak about that. But still, states and governments do not respond. They close their eyes, and this is my message, that we should not close the eyes. We must speak about the dangers in which we are confronted with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Irina. So, Irina, when you are speaking this way and you're concerned, this is a serious warning. So you know best what's happening on the floor, and when you speak this way, it has to be taken seriously. It's about trans-border, so that's fantastic. As you had this proposal, the positive one, examples you are giving. But we have been working on Kosovo already with Europa Nostra. You try also to be diplomatic, but I think that for people here, also the awareness, because when you hear this story, we should not always blame what they are doing in Syria and so on, because it's quite just the same. It has happened here and may happen again, so it's not that far, and that's really a very oppressive feeling you get to say, gosh, have we not learned anything? Huh? Yeah. So then I move to the other colleague, and that's then Anna Mirga-Kruszelnicka. Yeah. So she is of the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture, and we are really happy she is there, because then you get another way or another angle for approaching this. She is an anthropologist and had a PhD at the University in Cultural Anthropology, Social and Cultural Anthropology at the Universitat Autónoma in Barcelona. And she is deputy director at the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture. And the headquarters, this is ERIAC, the headquarters of this are in Berlin. So it's a very interesting connection. So what's your reaction on what you have heard, and how do you want to take it ahead?
Welcome everybody. First of all, I'd really like to say thank you to the organizers for thinking of inviting me in representation of ERIAC. I think what I will bring is a quite a unique perspective to what we've heard so far today, because I do not represent national interests. I don't represent any particular country. I don't speak about any particular physical site of cultural heritage. And also, I'm speaking on behalf of Roma, a transnational diaspora present all across Europe and also on across the globe. And I would also like to focus more, not so much only on tangible heritage, but also on intangible heritage, something that we haven't really touched upon so much during today's discussions. And in my short intervention, I'd like to take it back to the title of this conference and really think about the links between heritage and values. And I think we all agree that cultural heritage has a very important role in shaping identities of who we are, and ultimately identities of belonging. And in Europe historically has always been very diverse. Religions, different ethno-linguistic groups, the borders moving constantly across centuries. This is our legacy that Europe has been quite ultimately has been forgetting. And as we see European politics shifting towards right, and this emergence of very nationalistic and xenophobic attitudes, the very values that Europe aims to represent are being questioned and being challenged. And arguably, the project of building a common European identity has been questioned and has failed to an extent. And we know that the result of this is increasingly closing societies, reinforcing of borders and shaping of very exclusive identities. And I think nobody understands this better than the Roma. We are the biggest ethnic minority in Europe. We have been here for over 600 years. And the history of Roma is inseparable and completely intertwined with history of Europe as a continent and with the history of its nations. And we have been contributing to the shaping of national and cultural identities in many different ways, through language, through traditional crafts or occupations, through music, through folklore. Yet this is still largely unrecognized. So the question of belonging, of these contributions of minorities to national narratives and national identity are completely being excluded. So the contribution or the very place of Europe, of Roma in the European national discourses is absent. I think a very significant thing to point out here is that even the EU Cultural Heritage Year does not have a Roma component. So as for a group who's present all across, who's bigger than many of the European countries, with between 10 to 12 million people, only in this continent, this is quite a serious topic. And I think ultimately what it says is about the shape and the state of European democracies. It was Václav Havel back in the 90s who said that the treatment of Roma is a litmus test for European democracies, and I think this is quite true. So I'd like to take this opportunity to let us reflect on what this really means about us as societies, and that excluding minorities, and especially groups that have been present and belonged here, really shows a problem of the majority and how we think of ourselves. Also, I would like to maybe end with another quote by Günter Grass, a Nobel-winning writer, who said that the Roma people are what we are trying to become, true Europeans. Thanks.
Yes. I think this is a very authentic testimonial from you, and I think something we should listen to, something we are maybe not aware of, but maybe we are just denying, just putting aside, because they are around us, they are everywhere in Europe. And what did you say that you were quoting Václav Havel? What did he say?
He said the Roma are a litmus test for the state of European democracies. That was back in '93.
Yeah. In '93 already?
Yes, it was in the process of reunification of Europe, and the number of pogroms and violent attacks on Roma in many of the post-communist countries. I think maybe here, just to add one thing to maybe think and reflect on, is because this was something that was already mentioned, the role of institutions, whether it's museums or civil society organizations, and especially the role of states, and the role of intergovernmental organizations, like, for example, the UNESCO. So what do we do with groups that are lacking representation, whose interests are not represented? And even more so in a situation when we have such closing and increasingly nationalistic societies that actually exclude purposefully certain groups. So there is a existing centuries-long cultural and tangible and intangible heritage that's being inaccessible, forgotten, and destroyed.
Okay, I think this is very clear. I think this is a task where, because you have no representation, so there is no political power in situ. So you have to work with diplomacy. That's already, I think, a field where you are really, that's a way you can work when you don't have these political instruments already. You should have them, but I think, okay. Then as last one, we have, so I invite, where is my paper here? Yara Maula, who we have been listening to already. No? I know. So what is it? No?
Eliza Marin.
So they're not. Oh,
I think you're on the right page.
You're Eliza Marin, yes, and so. But it's true. We have been listening to
Yes,
you.
yes.
Right? That's true.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. So you are, and so you mentioned yourself also as World Heritage professional. And that's what we have heard. So the way you spoke. So you are a graduate with a master's degree in World Heritage Studies from the BTU Cottbus in Germany, and you are an emerging heritage world professional, cultural journalist and researcher, so I think we can work together for the future. You are bringing some new sounds and some new power. So what is your feeling after what you have been listening to?
Okay, I'm gonna try to be as short as I can because I would really like to hear the professor's opinion as well. I have to say that I am very grateful for your
microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't speak in the microphone.
Okay, I'm trying to be not so loud. I'm very grateful for all of your opinions, mainly because you represent the voice of communities or individuals. And I would like to maybe respond somehow to Anna's reflections, mainly because I also have a somehow unique position in the sense that I represent my as I try objective researchers' opinions and interests. And the idea is that I firmly believe in the idea of inclusion. And a lot of the conversations we have here about endangered values or endangered heritage is that behind this heritage are people. We have built heritage, and we talk about heritage, either tangible or intangible, but this is a human-made concept. This is a concept that we invented. We add value to heritage, and heritage is valuable to us as communities. And a lot of the times, of course, heritage is targeted by war, destroyed by somebody else. It's a symbol of some sort of religion, of some sort of power. It's destroyed by some other people or by their own people. But I think a lot of the times, the destruction and the danger is posed because people don't feel included anymore. We are a new generation, and we talked earlier about democracy, we talked about museums, we talked about not repeating the same mistakes, and I think it's safe to say that we need to create a safe space for discussion, a safe space where people can be their own cultural agents of their own heritage. And the Roma community, there are plenty of other religious communities there, and not only in Europe but also outside of Europe. We have an increasing communities of people coming from everywhere outside of Europe, and they must have a voice too. There must be created this space where people feel included and safe to talk about nationalistic movements, safe to talk about me being misrepresented by heritage, misrepresented by heritage discourse that is a lot of the times imposed by top-down policies, governments that do not speak for their own communities, like we've seen in Roșia Montana. And today is one of those occasions where we have the chance to talk about it. So I'm really looking forward to some of your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza. It's good. Thank you. So this safe space, I think that's a nice idea for discussion, and I think that everybody here agrees that with what we heard already, that the official political institutions are seldom a safe space, because there, and then I come to Dr. Karl Donfried, you said about this power. I think that these political institutions are about strong power. Yes. and seldom strong power is a safe place for this discussion, for this conversation, and so on. So what is your impression after having heard this?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank all of the panelists for their contributions, and I particularly like to thank you for your comments, which in a sense coincide with mine. Tell me, as one who lives in this area, how are the Roma people, in a sense, discriminated against by the more powerful structures of religion?
Well, I don't even know where to start.
Okay.
Alphabetical order, the size, historical relevance. Yes, I think it's enough to say that all across Europe, throughout our presence here. We have been enslaved for over 500 years in territories like Romania. We have been discriminated. We have been persecuted. We have been put into exile. We have been put on the ships across the ocean to the New World back during the colonizing era. I mean, you name it, all types of hate crimes, and ranging from individual acts of discrimination to institutionalized discrimination, we are still witnessing here in Europe. So currently, in contemporary Europe, in European member states, you have school segregation and you have forced sterilization, just to name the biggest cases. And just very recently, I think it was yesterday, that Deputy Minister of Italy, Salvini, just announced the imposing of an obligatory registry for Roma in Italy, both the immigrant and the nationals, the Italian citizens. And we know how racial policies and registries like that end. So I think that it's difficult, because when we speak about power and we speak about institutions, sure, we try to engage in cultural diplomacy, and we try to convince member states to engage in something that would be somewhere between social and cultural inclusion. But the racism is so deeply rooted that many times the politicians win votes with the anti-Roma agenda. So let's see how we can change that.
I think that's clear as answer, but I'm just looking at the time, because in 10 minutes we should stop, and so we haven't heard the audience. I would like to have who has an urgent question, and when you have a question, please, not a statement, but a question and brief. So I take some questions, and then we can see how far we can go. Are there any questions? But you have been. No, you have not been speaking. No, okay. You have been. I've been speaking. You have been. Yeah. Okay, go on. Yeah, I was looking at the other ones.
Okay, is there a microphone?
No, go on.
Okay, my question is about Europe. Like Europa Nostra is about Europe heritage, but also you give the example of a project that has been from Egypt yet managed from European, Italian and Greek. For me, I'm not from Europe. I'm from another country, but for me, the way I see Europe, I see it is a place of exchange, of a constant movement of people, and a lot of third or fourth generation of migrants that, surprisingly enough, when I came in to see them, I find something very different. They're not European, but they don't belong to any value system that their countries, their origin countries, belongs to. And that's kind of, they are in a vague, in a limbo or something. They don't belong and here, and they are completely far away from that. And I think Europe has enough examples of great values. And I'm not quite sure how this, with cultural heritage, or how cultural heritage can build up a platform to contain everyone, including those. And academia shows us a lot of examples, also professionals, the museums, also the role of the museums, how to include everyone, even those who don't belong exactly directly to the heritage that they are neighboring. So how, I think the question is how to include everyone, including those that they don't belong directly to a heritage, and build a connection and build up citizenship and identity. Like our idea was shared heritage, shared identity. What I see here, I see shared nationality, shared rights maybe on a political level, but not really shared values. So that's my question or my comment.
So the conflict between, or difference between nationality and values. That's where you are coming to, eh?
One day, if I may add, somebody asked me, like, why didn't you go to, like, I'm from a war country and they decided to come to Germany. Why didn't you go to the Gulf? I mean, you had a university, you've been working there and stuff. I said, no, I choose the place where I share more values.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think heritage can really play an important role in Europe.
Okay, so are there other questions? I would like to hear the question, and then we can see how far we come. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, say who you are.
Yeah, of course. Joe from California. I'm a master's student here. My question is regarding heritage sites and what we are allowing to not be saved and why, and then what we are saving and the reason why. And a couple case studies would be in Germany, we're not seeing any preservation of Nazi sites, obviously. The United States is preserving their Confederate statues, but right now they are tearing them down, which are, as we all know, linked to the white supremacy of slavery in the United States. So using those two case studies, where are we looking in cultural heritage site preservation, and what is a disqualifier, and for what reasons?
Oh, that's. I think we are not going to finish this discussion in 20 weeks. So is there another question?
From Albania.
Yes.
From Albania.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about the Roma or other minority groups that have been neglected by the traditional heritage protection bodies and listing recognition. Do you think that these groups will be able to feel a trust from those listing organizations or recognition organizations that have neglected them in the past? Do they actually want to seek out that type of recognition? Or is there something you would see as a better solution for recognizing their heritage?
Yeah, that's a question
And
for you. And
Yes.
so
Albania, from Moscow. Yes.
Very short
Very short question.
That's Albania. Yeah. Okay.
No,
okay.
I'm not from Albania.
I know, but but she said Albania.
I said the other.
Yeah.
Just the question is, how high on the political agenda of politics today is cultural heritage?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going. Okay, that's a nice one. Okay, thank you. And
Yeah, my question was more general. So from what I've been reading, it seems like there is a trade-off between economic benefits and protecting cultural heritage. So I was just wondering, since we have a panel full of experts in this field, if there is a golden mean between having like economical benefits as well as protecting cultural benefits.
yeah, okay. Let's stop here. First, most explicit question was the Roma. That's just, you can give a clear answer to that? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think that's an excellent question. The question of trust, I think it's very difficult because we have been mistreated by states, and many of the intergovernmental organizations are actually made up by those states. One very specific question is the flamenco, recognition of flamenco as an intangible world heritage. UNESCO recognized this in 2011. Evidently, flamenco is an art form that is born from a Gitano, from a Roma experience, of course with contributions and in a specific location, but it has been appropriated by Spain as its own cultural heritage. So when you actually read the text of that recognition, there is not one mention of Roma. So it's not even a question of ownership, it's a question of shared ownership and this narrative of belonging. So I think there is very many things that we have to be doing, and I think that primarily it's a question of educating ourselves and of visibility and presence. And this is what ERIAC, based here in Berlin, is trying to do. We are the first, historically the first European institution that works in the field of arts and culture to try to actually visibilize this and also stretch out links of connection with institutions, with museums. So I encourage all of you to visit us. We have a beautiful gallery space in Mitte, and also we are very open to collaboration.
Yeah, okay, then that's clear. Then the other question about Europe as a platform, so where people can, so should be, it was more the question, how is it possible that Europe, with all what it has to offer, doesn't or can't work as a platform where people who want to belong to are welcome and can profile themselves? Who is answering on this?
I would answer the question about the Nazi protection.
Yeah, but that's the next one. That's the next one.
That's
the
the
next one. Yes, the next one. So, okay.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
I mean, this tension between national belonging and sharing values, especially the case of diaspora, and it's a very important topic. For the Balkans, we know that we are not utilizing on our strength of diaspora for the preservation and promotion of heritage long term. So how do we open channels of inclusiveness and also being enriched by different values, because people who are living now all over the world are the bridge between the old and the new, and they can really, enrich the identities of the countries in the Balkans. So I think it's very good to look into tools that we have. How could we do this? Allow for individual freedom to belong in terms of values to any country you choose, and how to make systems that will allow this freedom. So it's a really...
So we have not to give the answers. The questions are important, and we can look for the answer. We have to work upon them.
Yeah,
So
but
okay.
like to think on that direction.
So
rather
I
than
think
wanting to
I think that Europe should be aware of what they have to offer, what they are, and the tone should change. I think that's important. The change of tone in Europe, so the narrative has to be brought in another way. So that's not of a majority, but in sharing and inviting. So I think that's a complete other way that Europe should profile themselves also in this. Then, so the other question was, and I like also that question about, I heard it also from somebody else, so about this, what do you do with disqualified cultural heritage, and which criteria are there?
As art historian, I think that it's extremely important to have in mind that every evidence, document, data from the past should be preserved. It means that we have so many wars until now, and so many destructions, and so many evidences has disappeared, that we must think about this preservation, the entire preservation, not about the ideological preservation. If you have ideologies, they will destroy everything which is not in the frame of their perception. And that happened with Nazi, as you said, or the slavery, or during the wars again in Yugoslavia. Only in Croatia, more than 3,000 monuments devoted to the anti-fascism were destroyed. Now they are recovering them, making research again, etc. So I think the worst thing in this area is the ideology. Ideology is something which will be benefit for ones and disaster for the others. I think that much more of knowledge, understanding, interpretation is important, and then everything that is preserved will have its place in history. Nazi Kunst and everything is already a kind of censorship. We have censorship for that, but it's not the question of censorship. It's question of interpretation and education, and that must be the good lecture for the future.
Yeah. So that's what I particularly, because in Belgium we have also the colonial past, for instance. We have the same, and there is a big debate upon that, but I think we should not hide that. We should not take it away. We should, the interpretation. So you explain, educate people what it has. That has been part of your past, and what we should not do at all is rewrite the history. So that's what we often do, and so we forget about this. No, it's no use, because if we forget about that, we are going to make the same mistakes some years later. So I think that's very important. And there was another question. Yeah, there was about the political agenda. So there I can just, then I am going to answer myself. So because I've now been working for 10 years with Europa Nostra, and so then I have seen what is happening now. For the former commissioner was a Cypriot, Mrs. Vassiliou, has ended her mandate as commissioner with a very important document about the transversal approach of cultural heritage within the policy. This was a courageous, very interesting document. The first time we got this. Now, when you see what has been happening in the Commission and in the Council of Europe, both, so they have come out with documents, and really read this new, that was some weeks ago, the new action plan for the new agenda for culture, new action plan for cultural agenda by the Council of Europe. Read the strategy for the 21st strategy for heritage for the 21st century by the Council of Europe. This is a new world for when you read this. Of course, now, how far is this going to be implemented? But then, let's say, we should also not always pinpoint the Commission, or I think the Parliament, because those who represent in our democratic system, us in the Parliament, they have to decide upon this. And so when a Parliament in the official text about the year write that cultural heritage is not, it's in the text, it's not a cost, it's an investment. Then I say, okay, than be logic. So I think it's a matter of convincing in the civil society, we and non-governmental people, and the volunteers and you all, we should not give up and should use every occasion to confront them with their commitment, with their belief, and that's our belief too, and then we are partners. So I'm not in opposition to the political authorities, but we should be partners, and that means we have to be loyal to certain principles, and not everything is possible, but we should walk the way together. Otherwise, you have the hard power and we the soft power, and if we just stay aside, each on one side of, don't have a bridge. So
have a smart power.
And let's become a smart power. Yes, that's a nice thing. You have been, because I see I have to stop. You have a question and your reaction also. Yeah. So the man of Cyprus. Yeah.
Yes, Marin from the UNESCO Chair on Digital Heritage and the Cyprus University of Technology. Congratulations, first of all. And you mentioned at the beginning about the Berlin call.
Yeah.
For me, it was a wake-up call when I heard the statement of the lady from the Roma minority. And I think if it will be nice, of course I don't know what it's in that call, if the minorities' cultural heritage will be highlighted and there be a statement for that call of declaration at the end of the day, of the week. Something else which is important, I would like to ask you, is that we are leading at the moment, me and my colleague here, Rob Davis, a project, the EU project, which is all about to write the agenda for the EU for the next framework program so far as digital cultural heritage concerned. And this is what you mentioned there, but also from the other speakers today. We would like to take it into account and enhance our documents. Therefore, we will make available whatever documents we have via Europa Nostra to you. And if you can contribute, this will be really a success story for us. Tomorrow we have also an event. It's at the SUSE Institute, and if you can join us, this will be nice, all of you. Thank you very much.
No, I take the point. I take your point, and we'll work with this. And this Berlin call, I can just say, this is a document now. It's there. It's and I think it's important. We are happy about this. But that's something you can also sign. You can also say we are behind this. We are going to put it on the website and so on. So this is. You use the word wake up call. Okay, let it become a wake up call. Right? So that's what we are working on. Okay, and you.
Yeah. I'm from Mexico City, and I have a question because you mentioned flamenco as a cultural heritage, which I thought it was very important. The music is beautiful, and the dance is also beautiful. But the question is, for example, there are a lot of traditions, like for example, bullfighting in Spain, which is by some other European cultures seen as a very bad tradition. My question is, should such traditions be kept, or what does it mean for a culture to maintain such traditions?
Mm-hmm.
And when there are other European cultures that I don't find.
Yeah.
Can I reply you as Spanish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even the police in Spain is asking you on Twitter, please, if you see that people are treating in a bad way animals, report us. And people are, okay, I see something, and they are sharing photos of bullfights, you know. Like, is that an example? Should be removed, you know.
I think we are not. I know these are the discussions indeed. This is
This is not culture.
This.
Bullfight is not culture.
So.
No ideology.
So I think we should not have discussions by saying yes or no. This is not. We have to talk around the table to see what's behind and where can we go, because that's the same as slaughtering the sheep within the Islam. And so we have in our countries. What do you do with the slaughtering? There are a lot of legal things, and you have a lot of values, and you have to respect this, and to make possible that. It's perfect is not of this world, but I think at least we have to talk and to explain why something is possible and why something should be stopped. Okay, it's involved. So I think it's more than time. So I I thank both, so all of you, for what you had brought yourself, for the way you reacted upon what has been offered here by the Institute, because the strong power of the Institute is not just the director and some teachers, it's also the people who are working at this Institute and who are spreading from here over the world. It is a global thing and doing their job. So I think that cultural heritage, as we have seen it today, has a power. It is a soft power, but a soft power that's very dangerous for those who are opposed to this power. It has arguments, it has in the long term, it takes some time, it has evidence-based that this can become a very smart power, and the other ones have to learn that they can win when they join this power, when they are not going to use this for their ideological or short-term wins, because that's the real problem. They go for short-term solutions and for short-term wins, mostly for elections, and that's 4 years or 2 years or 3 years. So I think we have that's the way people are, and maybe we are also sometimes for certain things so, but we should have the power to look further ahead, and let's say that cultural heritage is an instrument for a better, for cohesive, inclusive society where beauty, because it's something about beauty, let's not be afraid about speaking of that, where well-being and where happiness have a right to exist, to flourish, and then we can say fully cultural heritage is a human right for everybody, and that's what we have to fight for, we believe in. Thank you all together.